only beautiful walls. Presented by Aditya Birla Group, Big in Your Life. Co-presented by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist. Co-presented by JK Panchurghat Tire, अब हवा नहीं निकलेगी. Powered by NECC, Sunday हो या Monday, रोज खाओ अंडे. Co-powered by Dish HD, Cricket Castly Partner.
Warm welcome viewers, you're watching News Today. I'm Preeti Chaudhary and these are the headlines. Shah Rukh Khan's son Aryan gets a clean chit in cruise drug case. NCB says not enough evidence. Action against ex-NCB officer Sameer Wankhede, who led the probe. Terrorists who killed TV actor Amreen and injured her 10-year-old nephew gunned down in Avantipura encounter. But what about those who shot 9-year-old Safa? Tragedy in Ladakh. Bus carrying 26 army personnel skids off road and falls into Shyok River. 7 Jawans killed in the road accident. Hate crime horror stuns Karnataka. 25-year-old Vijay Kamble murdered for interfaith relationship. Cop says woman's family was against the relationship. North panel and Hindu side both filed fresh pleas in Varanasi court opposing the release of Gyan Vapi survey video in public. ED summons National Conference Chief Farooq Abdullah on May 31st, agency to grill former Chief Minister in Jammu and Kashmir Cricket Association money laundering case. Former Haryana Chief Minister O.P. Chautala sentenced to 4 years in jail in a disproportionate asset case. Court imposes 50 lakh fine on Chautala. India's biggest ever drone festival, Drone Mahotsav, kicks off in Delhi. Prime Minister Modi says India to become a drone hub by 2030. And author Gitanjali Shree's Hindi novel Tomb of Sand becomes first book in any Indian language to win the prestigious International Booker Prize. All right, viewers, let's cut across now to that exclusive conversation by our consulting editor Rajdeep Sardesai in conversation with Kaushik Basu and Arvind Panagariya on the state of India's economy after 8 years of the Modi government.
The Narendra Modi government is celebrating its 8th year in power. The economy remains its biggest challenge and potential opportunity. Is the economy in a better place than it was 8 years ago? Is inflation the biggest risk to growth? Will the global recession threaten the future? The Manmohan economy versus the Modi economy. Then and now, the big debate.
Hello and welcome. This week, the Modi government completes 8 years in power. 8 years in which there's been a ferocious debate on a range of issues. While social and political issues often grab the headlines, some of the more far-reaching decisions involve the state of the economy. In fact, the economy presents possibly the biggest challenge and also potential opportunities for the Narendra Modi government. Now, as the world also faces the prospect of recession and high inflation, those challenges are bang in the focus once again. Can India ride out the storm? Is the Modi government better placed today than the Manmohan Singh government was 13 years ago in the aftermath of the global financial crisis then to handle the situation? How should one be comparing the track record of Team Modi and Team Manmohan when it comes to handling economic challenges? The big economic debate. Joining me today are two very special guests, some of the country's finest economic minds, Dr. Kaushik Basu, Professor of Economics, Cornell University and former Chief Economist and Chief at the World Bank and also Chief Economic Advisor during the Manmohan Singh years, and Dr. Arvind Panagariya, Professor at Columbia University, former Vice Chairman of the NITI Aayog. He's joining me from New York and Dr. Basu is in Ithaca. Thank you both very much for joining me here on this special program. Let's start with you, Dr. Panagariya. We are in May 2022. Do you believe we are in a better place today than we were 8 years ago when Narendra Modi became Prime Minister for the first time in May 2014 when it comes to the state of the economy?
That's an easy one, Rajdeep. I think one will have to be blind not to see that we are in a much better shape today than we were in 2014. Just a few numbers to indicate where we were in 2014. Inflation was close to double digits. Current account deficit had been about 4% for 2 years, and in the last year, 13-14, it declined a little bit, but nevertheless quite high. And fiscal deficits in the preceding years had been extra high. There was huge paralysis in the government. Decision-making was simply not happening. And a number of laws had also been passed, which I expected will be detrimental to future growth. Which turned out to be true. Mm-hmm. I could name, for example, the retrospective taxation that happened. Then there was the Land Acquisition Act, even Right to Education Act. These were all laws actually which I felt were steps backwards, not forward. And at the time when I met actually, one of the leaders of the BJP, I had said that, that just as Prime Minister Vajpayee had to reverse many of the things that Prime Minister Indira Gandhi had done, there are some more things that have now been enacted, which will have to be reversed by the new government should the BJP come to office. So that was the state of affairs. You can read all the media at the time. The morale was extremely low. Today, we stand in a much better shape. Certainly, we have come out of the pandemic, and so, considerable stress resulting from that. Nevertheless, obviously, in any case, we have grown about, if I take the full periods, about 6.8% in the first 6 years. Now, the last 2 years have been a wash naturally. If you take them together, we are back to where we were in 1920. So I really see 1920 as the sort of point, which is where the per capita incomes are today, when they were in 1920. So we grew over that entire period 6.8%. If you take the first 5 years of Modi government, the growth was 7.4%, and first 4 was 7.7%. So by all means, this has been pretty good growth. Macroeconomically, we are much more stable. For the first time, there were about 6 or 7 years of consecutive years when we had fiscal deficit declining. And then, of course, the pandemic hit and things did change after that. So all in all, I think, poverty levels are definitely down. We don't have good numbers that I would trust. But there is no question, that we have seen much of the evidence has shown very decisively that growth lowers poverty, and so I have no doubt that poverty today is well below where it was in 2014.
I'll come to all the numbers you've thrown at me later in the show, but you've broadly said you believe the macroeconomic situation is much better today than it was in 2014. Dr. Kaushik Basu, do you agree with that we are therefore better placed, as Dr. Panagariya suggests, to perhaps tackle a potential impending global recession and high inflation, for example?
I have some agreement with Arvind, but also disagreement. So let me clarify. Point-wise comparison that you're doing, 2013 was a bad year. So inflation was still high. Inflation was coming down. I believe it had just gone below double digit. It had come down, but growth had done very poorly in that year. So inflation with low growth, that particular year is not very good. So when you're comparing year to year, there is a problem. But the overall comparison and the mood and the prospects, I feel, are worse now. And let me explain, also with a few numbers. You see, 2014, 15, even 16, the economy was doing fine. Actually, 2016, the Indian economy grew very rapidly. But from 2016, and it is not really just the COVID period, growth begins to drop every year compared to the previous year, all the way up to 2020. Last year, of course, growth has picked up again. We are getting back. But 5 years, where each of 4 years, the growth is less than the previous, certainly had not happened from 1970 onwards. I've looked at the Indian data. So it has been from 2016, generally poor performance on the growth front. Right now, if you look at the current situation, it is very difficult. But there, it's not a matter of what the government policy is. Currently, I do believe that the inflation that is hitting India, which is troubling everybody, is a global phenomenon. That is not at the doorstep of the government having caused it. That's not the case. It has come from outside. But the way it is being dealt, the kind of expertise that is being brought in is worrying me. So prospect-wise, I do feel very worried that 4 years of growth dropping each year from 2016. It is true there is a pickup in 2021, 22, but the overall situation is more depressing, and for the following reason. See, the inflation which has come from outside has a very interesting analog with 1998, soon after the East Asian crisis hit. And what is worrying me is not enough analysis is taking place in India, professional analysis, to get us out of this situation. Arvind should have been there. He would have done that better. But go back to that Asian period. Wholesale price inflation was very high. And the reason is, again, very similar. The inflation is coming from outside, wholesale prices picking up. And what you saw within a year, the retail price inflation picked up. And my own hunch is, right now, wholesale price inflation at 15.1% or 15.08%. The inflation in retail price, consumer price, is roughly 7.8, 7.9%. It's going to increase because the wholesale price is pushing it. So retail is certainly going to cross 9%. Nothing much can be done about that. But the worry is, with wholesale price inflation so high, retail price inflation high, but there are many other countries doing worse than India. But this gap becoming stretched between wholesale and retail means small businesses in India are being hit in a way that has not happened for a long time. That is being reflected in unemployment. And the youth unemployment data coming from the World Bank, India is way above most Asian countries. Central sort of Middle Eastern countries in turmoil, India's youth unemployment rate is over 24%. Malaysia, Indonesia, Bangladesh, all around 14%. India's comparable really to economies in deep trouble. And that is happening because small businesses and micro enterprises are faring very poorly. So though the point comparison 2014 or 2013 with now, there are two ways of looking at it, I agree. But if you look at the deeper problems, they are deeper today. And also society has got fractured. This is not a mistake in economic policy, but when it is so polarized, trust goes down, investment goes down. So prospect-wise, no, I'm not feeling cheerful at all. I have said repeatedly, and I'll say again, in terms of fundamentals, India is very strong. It has an entrepreneurial class. It has higher education. But it has become so polarized that investment rate has dropped. Over the last 6 years, investment to GDP has been dropping each year. And the unfortunate thing is the kind of discussion that we are having now, you're seeing too little of serious discussion taking place. It is political fighting that is going on. And so it does leave me very worried about the medium-term prospects of the Indian economy.
You know, these are two very contrasting perspectives being offered in a way. Dr. Panagariya, you want to respond to that? That while Dr. Basu seems to be agreeing that the macroeconomic situation at various levels does give cause for optimism, he believes there are serious concerns. He's highlighted inflation, highlighting youth unemployment, highlighting investment to GDP ratio as three potential areas which are of concern as this government enters its 9th year.
Well, I don't know where to begin, Rajdeep. First of all, you know, the UPA problem was not the problem of the last year. I mean, 12-13 was as bad as, probably worse than 13-14. 13-14 probably had a slightly higher growth of 6.4%. 12-13 was only 5.5. And before that was only 5.2%. So it was a long-term problem. And a lot of the reforms, you know, 10 years the country lost. There had been a huge momentum of reforms under Prime Minister Vajpayee, and then nothing for 10 years. Growth happened, but that's because all the reforms had been done earlier by Prime Minister Rao and Prime Minister Vajpayee. What did the Manmohan Singh government do? What did the government do when Kaushik was serving there? Hardly any reforms happened.
But can I just for a first moment intervene to say that both of you could well cherry pick the years that you choose. Dr. Basu chose, Dr. Panagariya, the period post-2016, when an economy that was seemingly growing into double digits, 10%, post-demonetization slips into 5%, and post-2018, pre-pandemic, before 2020 March, has several consecutive quarters of declining growth. Was 2016 an inflection point in your view, and therefore we must look at life pre-2016, post-2016, just as Manmohan Singh government pre-2008 and post-2008?
No, it's not actually. Look, I mean, you know, there is a cycle of growth rates. So just because growth rate is coming down doesn't mean growth rate is low. I think this is completely misleading way to look at the picture. I mean, growth rates, I can look at the growth rates rising from 5.2 to 5.5 to 6.4 to 7.4. I mean, these are the years where the previous government was finishing its term. These are rising growth rates. For 4 years, I give you from 5.2 to 5.5, 6.4, 7.4, 8.
Yes.
Is that high growth? That's very poor rate of growth. Actually, these growth rates, when even while declining, there are high rates of growth. From 8, you're going from 8 to 8.3 first, then you come to 7, then you come to 6.1. And yes, 1920 I can accept. 1920 was an exceptional year when the growth rate fell to 4%.
Yes.
But what was the cause of it? The cause of it goes back to, again, the UPA years. 2008 onwards, the kind of reckless lending that happened during that period. And this is a problem of NPAs, which always takes very long. And its manifestation ultimately into the decline in the growth rate is also much later. And that's what you see, actually, that 4% decline in the growth rate. But even during the pandemic years, the government has done enormous number of reforms, which will pay off as we go forward.
Give me, what according to you is that big ticket reform that you believe places this government in a better position to tackle the kind of challenges of a potential global recession and indeed high inflation?
Oh, wait a minute. First of all, the reforms I'm talking about are the insolvency and bankruptcy code,
yes,
for which I had been writing for 15 long years. It didn't happen. Finally, it was done by the Modi government. GST, labor law reforms, bringing the corporate profit tax to the global levels, So we are now competitive there. So these are 4 big ticket reforms. First, of course, the farm reform got reversed, but
Yes.
I'll leave that. Now, on inflation, I think we are agreeing here. Kaushik is also saying that the source is outside, but don't overstate it. Inflation has been at the target level, which is about 6%. Margin is 6.0 or 6.01 or 0.7 is hardly different from 6. So the last 2 months. So let's wait and see what happens. And there is a base effect going on, by the way. So the base effect is, we'll see what happens in May. Some decline we might see simply because of the base effect. Actually, if you look at the index itself, November, December, January, it is declining, the index itself. But the base effect was the one that was driving the inflation rate. So let's see, base effect actually will be favorable in May.
Let me take that to you, Dr. Basu, because, I can add to the reforms that were just spelled out by Dr. Panagariya, the digital infrastructure, the so-called tech stack that has been created, the fact that you have many more UPI payments, the fact that you've got through Aadhaar better delivery of services or indeed payments that are being made through the digital system. Are we therefore finding the greater formalization of the economy that the Narendra Modi government keeps speaking of as a strength? Or do you believe it hides or masks some of the weaknesses, particularly of the small and micro sector that has perhaps been the most hurt post-2016?
Rajdeep, let me just back up and get into this. I took off my jacket thinking it's going to be a tough argument that Arvind is presenting, but it's not. So let me explain. It is not just a question of this political party and that political party in power. India's good growth period is from 2003 to 2011. If you look at that period, barring a 1 year very sharp drop during the Great Recession, growth is hovering around 8% per annum from 2003 to 2011. Remarkable run. Poverty is declining, it's doing very well. Then, yes, there are difficult years, I'm agreeing with Arvind, but the current situation is by no means so rosy. This is disappointing me that if you play down the inflation, which is plaguing the country, retail inflation, I agree, 7.9%, there are worse countries, but it's going to rise because wholesale price inflation is pushing from behind. And the other thing that has to be kept in mind, which needs to be pointed out, growth. Yes, in the year 2021-2022, growth has picked up. 9%, 9.2%, there are different figures coming. Whatever it is, you have to remember that the previous year, Arvind was talking about base effect, India's economy had tanked by minus 7.3%, one of the biggest dips anywhere in the world. When you get 9.2% after a dip of 7.3%, the actual growth over the 2-year period is very, very small. So the growth that we've got per annum, just flatten it out over a 3-year period, even bring in the next year, it's around 3% per annum, which is shockingly low. When you get inflation, it is true inflation now is less than what inflation was there when I was in government. But when you get this kind of an inflation with growth as low as it is now, it begins to hit a segment. And I feel the biggest pain that the inflation is causing, and this is where I feel you do need to just bring the minds together. India has it. In fact, in some ways, I appreciate the kind of discussion that we are having. Bring people in that the working classes, the farmers are suffering in a huge way because growth is so low and the inflation is coming on top of that.
No, but you're saying, and let me stop you for a moment. You're saying that you're worried about low growth, yet growth this year is predicted to be 8%, the highest among the big countries. The IMF predicts that by 2027, India will be the world's 5th largest economy with a GDP of roughly $5 trillion at market prices. Your current account deficit is in a much better situation now than it was 8 years ago. Your foreign exchange reserves remain relatively healthy. I just spoke about the digitization substack that the government has in place. Would you therefore agree, Dr. Basu, that in that sense, some of the reforms that Dr. Panagariya speaks of keeps us in a better place at the moment in these tough times with global headwinds to meet these challenges? You've got the Economist cover story saying this is India's moment.
But Economist cover story, that is the cover. But as soon as you read a little bit more into the Economist story, it points out that it could all be undone by the politics of polarization and hate. That is being pointed out by the economists very, very clearly. But let me come back, Rajdeep. Some reforms I agree. For instance, the bankruptcy code, the GST. GST was, it had a lot of bumps in the road bumps in the end, but it was a very good move. And the bankruptcy code, I had that time meetings when it was being initiated. I think it's a very good move. I didn't know that Arvind had played a very major role. But the prospects and the IMF figure that you're giving, growth of 9%, when it comes on the heels of minus 7.3%, that is not a huge growth, that is climbing out of there. And on inflation, the base effect that was pointed out, wholesale price inflation is in double digits now for 13 months, which means when you're comparing inflation now with 1 year ago, there is no base effect explaining this inflation. It is on double digit. You've again got double digit, in fact, 15%. So wholesale price inflation is very bad, and it's not surprising. We have not seen as high wholesale price inflation as we are having now. After 1998, we have not seen that. And what we did know then is that soon it filters into the retail inflation, and that also picks up. So I think it is a dangerous moment. And yes,
but you've got the government. Let me continue to press you. You've got the government at the moment acting on some of the worried about inflation. You've got a hike in rates that the RBI has put in place. You've got a wheat export ban at the moment. You've got sugar exports that are now being restricted. You've got import duties on cooking oil that have been reduced. So clearly the government has recognized the challenge. It is a global challenge, as both of you are accepting, Dr. Basu.
Yeah. So, no, the immediate couple of these moves again immediately, trying to lower the price of fuel, etc., I feel are again right moves. But, Rajdeep, I think it needs to be recognized that there are things going wrong structurally. And all these things about IMF saying 5 years later, first of all, GDP being the fifth greatest, with a country as large as India's in terms of population, it will be. That's not the important thing. Per capita income.
What is the before I go back to Dr. Panagariya, what is the structural problem that you find, Dr. Basu, at the moment? What is that structural problem? What is the structural issue, Dr. Basu?
Sorry?
What is the structure? You say what is the structural issue?
Two things I will point out. Investment to GDP ratio has been falling for about 5-6 years.
And the second?
This is something from textbook economics. We know it's one of the biggest drivers. And there is a very subtle connection. There are studies which show that the level of trust in society, whether people are acting together, and this is not putting blame at someone's doorstep. It is true that India is very fractious. And once it becomes fractious, trust begins to go down. From the studies of Francis Fukuyama to laboratory tests, we show that the economy begins to do poorly. So that is worrying me. That is the
third time you've said that. So I think Dr. Panagariya deserves a response, because Dr. Panagariya, the cover story of The Economist is India's moment, but will the Modi government blow it? And one of the factors being suggested even in that report is the potential that political divisions and polarization can have on economic growth. 3 times today, Dr. Basu has focused on that. You want to respond to that?
Well, look, Rajdeep, I don't go into political debates.
Yes,
but
do you see it affecting the economy? No, do you see it affecting the economy?
Yeah. Let me simply say that, look, the fractious politics of India has always been there. I mean, for decades, all political scientists have focused on predicting Indian elections based on caste politics. And if you really think that this was going to blow it up, why hasn't it blown it up for the last 8 years? I mean, if your Modi era is the problem for you, then show me the evidence. I mean, that has been the government has been there for 8 years, and even before Prime Minister actually won the election, by number of people, these predictions were being made.
No, so are you saying? Are you saying, Dr. Panagariya, that any potential social chaos will have no impact on the economy? Do you believe this is fear-mongering? Do you believe Dr. Basu is doing fear-mongering?
No, I am asking you to show me the evidence. Show me the evidence. I am just saying that he's imagining. That's what is happening. I think, we are a robust society. We are, it's a society that has been there for millennia. It's not like India was born only 75 years ago. We are a robust society and we have differences and we deal with those. That doesn't bring things to, I mean, if really what Professor Basu is saying is true, then I should be seeing riots all around. I don't see any riots happening anywhere. In fact, the riots are far fewer than they used to be. So anyway, I mean, to me, this is not the big issue. This is, and you have not given me the evidence of the impact in any case. But let me come back to some of the things that Professor Basu said. Look, first of all, I'm not contesting the base effect in the present year, in the year that just ended. Numbers I will correct that the growth decline actually was 6.6%. Not there is an old figure he's using, and the recovery was 8.9%, not 9.2%. But we don't have any disagreement on that one. What I think you said, Rajdeep, was that IMF is forecasting the growth for the coming year, 22-23, which is over 8%. And that forecast being over 8% is definitely not a base effect, because we have already in 122 grown 8.9%. So the base effect is gone. So the optimism that the IMF is expressing, the World Bank is expressing, predicting, 4.7 trillion. I think the World Bank predicted about 4.7 trillion for the year 24-25 or 25-26 probably. So after all, that's coming from somewhere. Ultimately, and if you don't recognize that and you keep mentioning factors that are in your mind, but I don't see the manifestations of it actually happening outside, then it is a hard point for me to tackle.
Can we just settle this once and for all, Dr. Basu? Because, you keep emphasizing what you believe social polarization, as you see it, will do to economic growth. Do you want to quickly respond to that, and then we'll move on?
Yeah, I'm not saying this is certainly going to cause India's growth to tank, because we may begin to correct ourselves. And when Arvind is talking about evidence, the trouble is we are looking into the future. So I'm not giving evidence into the future, nor is he giving evidence into the future, because that's not possible to give. But these things about trust and breakdown of growth, there are cross-country studies, there are laboratory studies that groups that trust one another begin to do better, and it stands to reason. So that does worry me. But I am still, as I say, that I think India has strong fundamentals. It had higher education, which was very strong. It has an entrepreneurial class, which is very strong, and a lot of skill. If we can begin to make corrections, yes, India could grow. But these forecasts, IMF, World Bank, I've sat in one of those and done it when you're talking about something 2 years later. This is really, again, without evidence, you're doing pen on paper, a couple of things. And one more thing I will point out, that the base effect is not gone. Even if next year the growth is 8%, it having been, 6.6, say minus 6.6, 8.9, still it's very tiny growth over a 2-year period. So on the trajectory, India went flat, and then it picks up. So again, if you draw a straight line, I can do this all on television. It's not such a huge growth, because we are still climbing out of one of the biggest. India's growth drop during the COVID is one of the worst performance in the world.
Can I stop you?
I disagree with that. I disagree with that. Number of countries actually declined as much as India did, or more.
During COVID. You're saying during COVID?
I've written about that. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now. But that is a false claim.
So you're saying during COVID, a number of countries declined. Don't just look at India's decline. You're looking at it as a global decline. Am I correct, Dr. Panagariya?
Yes. Yes, I am saying that.
Can I, though, push both of you on a concern that many people have, rising inequality? Again, this is not something that didn't exist pre-2014, but the fact is, when you see a certain concentration of wealth at times, Dr. Panagariya, when you see the inequality reports that emerge, the top 10% accounting for more than 60% of incomes, does that worry you? That while we grow, there is also an element of cronyism settling in. You referred to various reforms like the insolvency and bankruptcy code, all positive. But there's also a concern of monopolization and cronyism that is emerging in our economy. Does that worry you at all?
So my take always on this, Rajdeep, has been that for a developing country, poverty problem trumps the inequality problem. At the end of the day, poverty is something about which I can do something. But inequality, there's a lot of intellectual discussion, including international inequality and all. But give me one instance where actually inequality has been massively kind of tackled.
So you're saying, Dr. Panagariya, poverty levels have declined in the last 8 years. There is an IMF report that seems to now suggest it. The government's attempt to provide welfare benefits, free ration during COVID being an example, helps to offset possibly the difficulties that people face. You've got the Krishi Samman Yojana. You believe these schemes work. Am I correct? You don't see them as doles. You see them as direct benefits.
No, they definitely do help. But to me, much more important is the fact that the country has grown. I think when the country grows rapidly, these transfers can also grow with it.
It's not trickle-down economics again, which many people
It's pull-up effect. It's a pull-up effect. You know, growth is an engine that works very effectively in bringing people up. And at least up to 11, 12, the evidence is very clear, actually. You know, not only growth helped the poor in general, but every single group.
Right.
If you look at scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, Hindus, Muslims, Jains, Sikhs, every single group, I have done the numbers myself, actually, so I can tell 11, 12, speak with full confidence that poverty declined significantly in every one of those groups.
But would it be right to say, Dr. Basu, that poverty has declined? Would I be able to find a consensus that both between 2004 and 14, when there was the UPA government, and now in the last 8 years, there is, because of the kind of growth that we've seen in most years in this period, a significant decline in poverty reduction? Can you give credit to both governments? Possible?
I would give credit to both governments, because if you look at just poverty, all the way from about 2001, 2002, poverty has been declining fairly steadily. So I don't know whether I'll give credit to both government or credit to neither government. But on this, I wouldn't distinguish between the two. One disagreement with Arvind, I will point out, this is not really in terms of economic analysis, but a normative position. For me, I agree with him. The most fundamental challenge in a society is poverty. And to that extent, we feel that it's going in the right direction. The COVID period has been a challenge for everyone. I'm not talking about that. But I am also concerned about inequality and cronyism. I don't think you can dismiss that. This is a global problem. And you have to at least be aware of that. The level of inequality in the world today, and this is not a question of my country or that country or this government or that government. Inequality in the world today is shockingly high. So yes, poverty is the biggest challenge, but inequality and cronyism is something, if we look away from that, you are going to, in the long run, damage democracy, people's rights, people's space. So inequality is something that the best minds in the world need to get together. And fortunately, one thing you do see in the United States and even a few in India, where some of the richest people say that I feel good, I've become so rich. But this is a problem when so few people become so rich and so many remain poor. When I hear even some of the super rich join in this debate, I feel a little bit of hope that there are at least people like me who are troubled about the level of inequality and cronyism that we are seeing.
All the unicorns that are coming together are trumpeted by the government, of course, as an achievement. Let me therefore ask you both in conclusion, you, Dr. Panagariya, first. What do you see as the biggest achievement of this government in the last 8 years on the economy, and the biggest failure? What's the achievement and the biggest failure?
Well, the achievement has been to sustain growth at a time when circumstances had been extremely adverse, and tackle truly difficult reforms. You know, some of these reforms have been waiting to be done. I had written myself for almost 20 years. So in spite of all the political difficulties, to take the courage and do those reforms, I think that's a huge thing. The negative I would point out is, again, goes to my favorite theme, which is that, you know, on international trade, I think this government has gone back. I would like, you know, because no country really prospers without succeeding in the global markets. And that's something I still think will continue to grow 7 to 8%, but our potential is 10%.
May I for a moment, since you mentioned sustained growth, do you therefore in hindsight believe demonetization was the right step or not? How will demonetization, now we are 6 years into it, how will you see it? As a positive, a negative? How do you see it?
Yeah, well, probably you have to have a separate conversation on this, Rajdeep. Might say, one thing is not, good or bad is not enough.
But you're not putting it in the debit. You're not putting it in the debit column, are you?
No. Because look, a lot of digitization started from there. The digitization really picked up speed as a result. So certainly, that's only one factor. But
so you're saying sustained growth in your view, and of course the reforms that you claim the Modi government has brought in are the big achievements. Dr. Basu, the big achievement and the failures that you've seen in the last 8 years. Biggest achievement, biggest failure.
Well, I believe personally that the bankruptcy code was a very, very major piece of legislation. GST, with all the stumbling that took place in the beginning, was a very good move. It has a long history of trying to bring that about, but I'm glad that that happened. It's two big things. But for me, the fractures that are showing up in the economy, the small businesses doing badly, the micro enterprises doing badly, youth unemployment at a shockingly high, over 24%, which you don't get anywhere else in reasonable Asian countries, only in troubled economies. These are signs of very, very deep fractures. So while the potential is there and the fundamentals are there, I am feeling very worried about the growth prospects down the road. I don't think right now it is not appearing likely that India is going to maintain growth rate of 8% or so, which from 2003 to 2011 was a commonplace. We were stuck over there. No, the fundamentals are not the fundamentals of the economic structure, but the political fractures are beginning to worry me very, very deeply. And the fact that the poorest people, the farmers and all, are suffering now is troubling me. Don't take just the poverty line. There I'm agreeing with Arvind. If you take the World Bank poverty line, the population below that, it is going down over time. But there is a large segment of the lower middle class in India who are very, very badly suffering because of this polarization and also not just of politics, but and the economy, where the inequality is going up. So this segment is being hit very badly, and that's none of this is good in the medium to the long term.
I'm listening to these two fine minds and wondering where I can find convergence. One in New York, one in Ithaca, both who've been deeply, intimately worried as well as involved with the Indian economy. Is there a way, Dr. Panagariya, apart from maybe getting the two of you to have a drink the next time you meet in New York, a way to get you all together? Is there are economists as polarized as those of us who follow politics?
I think the basic difference, Rajdeep, is that I am an optimist. I'm an eternal optimist. And it seems to me that Kaushik is a pessimist. And that's where the problem is, because he sees problems that are not there. Even on this polarization business, we are a civilizational state. And we have lived in harmony, and we will continue to live in harmony. So I'm not sure where he comes from. But the economy-wise, I don't see this youth unemployment that he keeps referring to. That has been there in the data. As the country became more prosperous, the ability of the parents to support the children for longer period of time has improved, and that has led to some structural change there. So I'm not saying that this is not a problem we need to tackle, but it's
we have a large technological skilled workforce. We have a large technological skilled force, which could be our strength, our demographic dividend. But others also believe that because of automation, you may also have certain struggles. You have small and micro enterprises that have faced a lot of difficulties over the last 5 years. So in a sense, much like a lot of what we've said, it's a mixed bag. I mean, I think that would be a good way to... And then it depends whether you see the glass as half full as you do, Dr. Panagariya. And Dr. Basu, you're being gently nudged by Dr. Panagariya to look at the glass as half full and not as half empty.
But what got me worried is Arvind saying that he's an eternal optimist. I worry about eternal optimists. I'm optimist on some occasions and pessimist on some occasions because I'm looking at the data and the evidence. Eternal optimists do worry me. But Rajdeep, more seriously, You're talking about the economics professions polarization, it's actually not that big. Because we are discussing contentious issues that we are getting into disagreements. But that's what is worrying me, that you have to bring in professionals who, when they sit down, closed door situation, there's a lot of agreement within the economics profession now, which has really advanced. And there would be a lot of agreement and a lot of little policies. But of course, there are important disagreements. And when we are talking about the disagreements, it appears even more polarized than it.
Can I therefore try to find a way to...
Rajdeep.
Yes, go ahead.
Rajdeep, one thing, I got to say it here. I mean, Kaushik has been continuously talking about bring the experts. But, during the UPA era, we had all the experts in the world. Actually, you had the Prime Minister was a top economist. You had Montek Singh Ahluwalia there. You had P. Chidambaram there. What happened? And of course, Mr. Kaushik Basu and then Raghuram Rajan. So all the best minds were there. What happened?
Okay,
Why did we not have any reforms?
Too many economists.
Why did we not have reforms?
Too many economists in one room can be a problematic situation, particularly when you don't have a strong government.
No, I don't think so. The basic problem was it is the government. Ultimately, look, advice is always available. Economists, they write everywhere, Right. Do you think Professor Basu's advice is not available to the present government or somebody else's or mine if I'm not in the government? I write there. Our views are there in the public domain. And so it's up to the government, ability of the government to use it. Right. And some governments use that advice and some don't. It's not necessary that everybody, all the time, the best economists have to sit inside the government.
Can I therefore ask both of you, and I just have a minute, what is that one piece of advice that you would give Prime Minister Modi? Dr. Basu, you first this time. If you were to give him advice for the next 2 years leading up to 2024 to get the animal spirits of the economy taking off, what would that one piece of advice be?
One is just holding the country together, making the people that there is a collective, the India is a collective identity that to be nurtured is extremely important, irrespective of people's narrower identities. That ought to be done. On the economic front, I do believe that just by outside writings and op-ed that Arvind is talking about, that's not good enough. For many of the little policies, it's the fine print that matters. When you're designing an auction, the little bits of design that matters. And there have been huge mistakes like the demonetization, simply because the expertise was not brought in and this was being done. So you have to bring that in. It appears intuitive, economic policy making, and some parts of it is intuition and common sense. But there are parts of it also very, very intricate, and countries which go into that and put in the best do much better. So for the long run, if you do emphasize on these two things, India has strong fundamentals, we will grow. But if we don't, I do worry that we are going to begin to stumble.
So therefore, 30 seconds to you, Dr. Panagariya, what's the piece of advice you speak often to Mr. Modi? What's that one piece of advice you'd like to give him now?
Well, if it's exactly one, then I have written about it many times that we need the economy to be more liberal in terms of opening the economy to foreign trade. I think raising custom duties is not the right thing to do. We should lower them. But if we don't lower the custom duties, let us at least sign free trade agreements with the major countries of the world. In particular, I think I would like to see a free trade agreement done with the European Union. That will go some ways towards opening the economy. I think that's a very important ingredient on which all the other reforms will build the country's growth in a very effective sort of way.
On that positive note, in a way, economists sharing their advice to the Prime Minister, two stellar economists who've had plenty of experience doing that, joining me. It's been a pleasure talking to both of you. Dr. Panagariya, Dr. Kaushik Basu, stay well, stay safe. And once again, thank you so much for joining us on this very special economy debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajdeep.
All right, here's a quick break. On the other side, Shah Rukh Khan's son, Aryan, gets a clean chit in the cruise drugs case. NCB says not enough evidence.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com or call 9999892171.
You are watching India Today.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching News Today. Now, big relief coming in for Shah Rukh Khan's son, Aryan Khan. The Narcotics Control Bureau has given Aryan a clean chit in the drug bust case. The NCB says there is no evidence against the Bollywood superstar's son to file any charges at all. Sources now say the government has ordered action against Sameer Wankhede, the officer who arrested Aryan for shoddy investigation. In the charge sheet by the NCB, viewers, it's mentioned that the investigating officer tried to implicate the operative word, Aryan Khan.
Shah Rukh Khan's son Aryan Khan gets a clean chit in the Cordelia cruise ship drug scandal that rocked the country last year. The Special Investigation Team of the Narcotics Control Bureau on Friday filed a 6,000-page charge sheet in a Mumbai NDPS court. While 14 people are charged, Aryan and 5 others are let off. The NCB says Aryan, who spent 26 days in jail as part of the investigation, was never in possession of drugs and there is no evidence he consumed any.
We found in our investigation that his friend stated in his own statement that the drug that he was carrying was not meant for Aryan. So the basic premise that a drug that was found on his friend was is baseless or fallacious.
The SIT has elaborated why a case was not made out against Aryan. Aryan did not undergo any medical test. His WhatsApp chats were not related to the case. Aryan did not take any drugs and dissuaded others from doing so. Sources also say that NCB did not find any evidence that linked Aryan with any international drug trafficking network. Several questions have cropped up after the NCB's U-turn. First, what proof did Narcos claim to have that they don't now have? Second, can action be taken against Narcos for Aryan chat leaks? And last, will Shah Rukh's family demand action against the Narcotics Control Bureau? For SRK and family, Aryan's clean chit comes on a special day. It is Shah Rukh Khan's son Abram's 9th birthday. Aryan was arrested in the Mumbai cruise drugs case on October 2nd. After several court hearings and lots of drama, the Bombay High Court granted him bail on October 28th. Aryan walked out of jail on October 30th.
Cordelia drug cruise case went on to become the most high-profile drug case of the country as Aryan Khan was arrested in it. But when the charge sheets are filed, no charge is seen against Aryan Khan, which reflects badly on the anti-drug agencies and their work done, because it puts them in bad light, saying if the most high-profile case was done without evidence, how many such other cases have been done by the agency? With cameraman Sahil Chavan, Mustafa Sheikh for India Today.
Big win coming in for security forces in Jammu and Kashmir. In less than 24 hours, Indian armed forces gunned down the killers of Kashmiri TV actor Amreen Bhatt. Lashkar terrorists who killed the TV actor and injured her nephew were neutralized in Kashmir's Avantipora.
Justice for Kashmiri TV actor Amreen Bhatt.
ये जात है एक कहा था कश्मीर में मुसलमान मुसलमान को मारता है। क्या करे, मेरी बेटी ने क्या किया उसको, क्या खाया उसको? अपना काम कर रहे हो, अपना बाप को पालता है, बेटे दूसरे बहन को पालता है, इसके बच्चे को पालता है। इसने क्या गुनाह किया उसने?
Within 24 hours of her murder, Bhatt's killers are eliminated. Two Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorists allegedly behind the assassination were killed by security forces in an encounter in Avantipura. The police say both suspects were fresh terror recruits. They were allegedly acting on directions of Lashkar-e-Taiba commander Latif.
LT का टेररिस्ट मारा गया है और हम सब को याद है कि 2 दिन पहले एक टीवी एक्ट्रेस को मारा था। हम लोग तभी से उसको ट्रैक कर रहे थे, उसमें से दोनों मारे गए हैं। लतीफ़ के डायरेक्शन पर दोनों ने किल किया था।
Amreen Bhatt, who was accompanied by her nephew, was gunned down by the terrorist in front of her house on Wednesday. While Amreen succumbed to the shots, her 10-year-old nephew was injured. The child is still in shock.
तब मुझे दुकान पे जाना था, वहाँ से 2 लड़के आए, उन्होंने बोला अपनी मौसी को बुलाओ। मैंने जब बुलाया तो वो आई, उन्होंने बोला उसे बड़गाम में प्रोग्राम है, वो आ गई। फिर मेरी मौसी, मेरी मौसी ने बोला उनको आप कौन हो? उन्होंने उसी वक्त गन निकाला और फायरिंग की। उसके बाद मुझे पता नहीं।
This attack came just days after Jammu and Kashmir constable was shot dead and his daughter fired at, sparking massive condemnation and a widened crackdown on terror.
नया ट्रेंड है टेररिस्ट का कि लोगों में टेरर फैलाना, भय फैलाना, इसलिए सिविलियन को, वुमेन्स को, छोटे बच्चों को टारगेट कर रहा है।
मरकजी सरकार है वो जूं की तू है, उनकी जो उनकी मस्कुलर पॉलिसी है, दबाव की पॉलिसी है, दोन्स की पॉलिसी है, उसका ये नतीजा है कि दिन ब दिन जम्मू कश्मीर में हालात बेहतर होने के बजाय बिगड़ रहे हैं।
Justice for Amreen delivered. Now to ensure justice for Safa. With Ashraf Wani in Srinagar, Bureau Report, India Today.
Another interfaith killing has taken centre stage in Karnataka after Naga Raju and Mithun. Now Vijay Kamble from Kalburgi has allegedly been murdered for an interfaith relationship. Vijay Kamble, the deceased, was reportedly beaten up by a gang of miscreants. The cops are now probing whether the girl's family had a hand behind the murder.
Gujarat, Telangana and now Karnataka. These 3 men bore the brunt of love. In Kalaburgi, Karnataka, Vijay Kamble is the latest victim to be brutally murdered over his interfaith love affair. Weapons, stones and bricks were used to brutally assault Kamble until he met his death. Kamble's family claims his relationship was vehemently opposed by the woman's family.
सर मुसलमान कास्ट ನಾವು ಎಸ್ಸಿ ಸರ್ ಅದೇ ಸಮಾಜ ಅವರು ಮುಸ್ಲಿಂ ಕಾಸ್ಟ್ ಅವರು ಒಂದು ಟೈಮ್ ಅವರಿಗೆ ಭೇಟಿ ನೀಡಿ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಅವರು ಕಾಂಪ್ರಮೈಸೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು ಸರ್. ಅವಾಗ ಎಲ್ಲ ಓಕೆ ಆಗಿತ್ತು ಸರ್. ಮತ್ತೆ ಅದು ಸಡನ್ ಆಗಿ ಯಾವಾಗ ಇದು ಆಯಿತು ಗೊತ್ತಾಗಿಲ್ಲ ಸರ್.
The police have arrested 2 suspects. They are probing the possible involvement of the woman's family in the murder.
ಕಲಾಸ ಆಗೇನ್ರಿ, ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಮಾತು ಬರ್ತದ ಹೇಳ್ರಿ ನೋಡ್ರಿ, ಪೂರ ಕಲಾಸ ಮಾಡಿಬಿಟ್ರಿ, ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇಕಲ್ಲಿ ಚೂರಿ ಹಾಕ್ಬಿಟ್ರಿ ಪಾರಗ. ನಿನ್ನ ಮಗನಿಗೆ ಚಲೋ ಬುದ್ಧಿ ಕಳ್ಸ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದ್ಸಲ ನಮ್ಮ ತಂಗಿಗೆ ಇದು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಿನ್ನ ಮಗನ ಕುತ್ತಿಗೆ ಕೊಯ್ ನಿನ್ ಕೈಯಾಗ ಕೊಡ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂತ ಅಂದೋದು.
Politics has erupted with the Congress and BJP locking horns over who must take the onus to protect interfaith couples.
Well, a man was killed because he married a Muslim woman. But ironically, those who trend Dalit Lives Matter, those who talk about Jai Bhim, Jai Meen, today are silent about the killing of Vijay Kamble. Today, no placards are being held up.
This is not the first instances of moral policing happening in the state. Women are objectified and the society thinks, the patriarchal mindset thinks, women can be told who to live their life with. My question is, why isn't the Home Minister visiting the bereaved family?
We are in the 21st century, but the spurt of killings shows interfaith relationships are still unacceptable in our society. Bureau Report, India Today.
On that note, viewers, it's a wrap on this edition of News Today. You have a fabulous weekend. We'll see you on Monday.